What would you do if you watched your partner flirt dance with a stranger for a harmless bet and then realized they had no idea you were standing there seeing every second of it? The bass thumped through my chest as I surveyed the Velvet Loop, downtown's hottest bar on a Friday night. The dim lighting cast everything in a sultry red glow, and the crowd was thick with 20 and 30-somethings looking to blow off steam after another soul-crushing work week. "Come on, Philo, you're not backing down now, are you?" Jenna Leary's voice cut through the music, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a cosmopolitan. At 33, she still dressed like she was fresh out of college. Tight black dress, stilettos that could double as weapons, and enough makeup to stock a department store counter. I took another sip of my wine, feeling the alcohol warm my blood. "I never said I was backing down. I just said it's stupid." "Stupid?" Jenna laughed, tossing her bleached blonde hair. "What's stupid is being married to Daniel for 8 years and acting like you're dead from the waist down. When's the last time you felt desired? When's the last time a man looked at you like he wanted to devour you?" The question stung because I knew the answer. Daniel and I had fallen into that comfortable routine that kills passion slowly, like carbon monoxide poisoning. Work, dinner, Netflix, bed, rinse and repeat. When was the last time he'd even noticed when I wore something new? "It's just a dance," I said, more to myself than to Jenna. "One dance with a stranger to prove I've still got it." "Exactly. And when you win this bet, drinks are on me for the rest of the night." Jenna's eyes sparkled with mischief. "But you have to really sell it. None of this middle school swaying back and forth. I'm talking full-on seduction mode." I glanced around the bar, my HR coordinator instincts automatically cataloguing potential problems. Too many people from our social circle frequented places like this. What if someone saw me? What if word got back to Daniel? Then again, what was the worst that could happen? It was just dancing. Harmless fun between friends. Daniel was probably at home in his pajamas, reading financial reports or watching some boring documentary about tax law. He never wanted to go out anymore, always claiming he was too tired or that we needed to save money. "Fine," I said, finishing my wine in one gulp. "But I get to pick the guy." Jenna clapped her hands together. "Yes, that's the Philomene I remember from college, the one who could have any guy eating out of her palm." I stood up, smoothing down my red dress, the one Daniel had barely glanced at when I'd modeled it for him earlier, the one that hugged my curves in all the right places and made my legs look miles long. Tonight someone was going to appreciate it. The bar was crowded, bodies pressed together in the perpetual dance of attraction and alcohol. I scanned the room, looking for the right target. Not too young. I wasn't trying to be some creepy cougar. Not too old. Where was the challenge in that? Someone attractive enough to make this interesting, but not so gorgeous that I'd be out of my league. That's when I saw him. He was leaning against the far end of the bar, dark hair slightly tousled, wearing a fitted black t-shirt that showcased well-defined arms. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. He had that casual confidence that came from knowing he was attractive without being arrogant about it. Perfect. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from Daniel. "Hey babe, how's girls' night? Don't stay out too late. Love you." I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a flicker of guilt. Then I thought about how he'd barely looked up from his laptop when I'd kissed him goodbye, how he'd mumbled something about having fun while clearly not caring whether I did or not. I shoved the phone back in my purse without responding. "Target acquired," I announced to Jenna, nodding toward the dark-haired stranger. "Ooh, nice choice. Very mysterious bad boy at the end of the bar. Go get him, Tiger." I made my way across the crowded floor, my confidence building with each step. This was just like riding a bike, right? I'd been good at this once upon a time, before marriage and mortgages and all the mundane responsibilities that slowly strangled the life out of you. He looked up as I approached, and I caught my breath. Green eyes, the kind that seemed to see right through you. A slow smile spread across his face as he took in my appearance. Hi there, I said, leaning against the bar next to him. I'm Philo. Evan, he replied, his voice a low rumble that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. That's an interesting name. Short for Philomene? I was impressed. Most people butchered my name or asked stupid questions about it. Very good. Most people just call me Phil, which makes me sound like a middle-aged accountant. Nothing middle-aged or accountant-like about you, Evan said, his eyes traveling appreciatively down my body before meeting my gaze again. Can I buy you a drink? I'd love that. The words came out more breathless than I'd intended. When was the last time someone had looked at me like that, like I was something delicious they wanted to taste? Evan signaled the bartender and ordered another wine for me and a whiskey for himself. As we waited, he moved closer, and I caught a whiff of his cologne, something woodsy and masculine that made me want to lean in and breathe deeper. So, Philomene, he said, testing my full name on his tongue. What brings you out tonight? Celebrating something? Just girls' night out, I said, accepting my wine. Sometimes you need to remind yourself that you're more than just your daily routine, you know? I definitely know. His fingers brushed mine as he handed me the glass, and I felt electricity shoot up my arm. Life's too short to spend it all being responsible and boring. The music shifted to something slower, more sensual. Bodies on the dance floor pressed closer together, moving in rhythm to the hypnotic beat. Dance with me, Evan said. It wasn't a question. I glanced back at Jenna, who was watching with barely contained glee, already pulling out her phone to record my victory. This was it. Time to prove I still had what it took. I thought you'd never ask, I said, taking his offered hand. The dance floor was packed, which meant we were pressed close together from the start. Evan's hands found my waist, and I looped my arms around his neck, letting him guide me to the music. He was a good dancer, confident and smooth, and I found myself relaxing into the rhythm. You're beautiful, he murmured in my ear, his breath warm against my neck. My heart hammered against my ribs. When was the last time Daniel had called me beautiful? Really meant it, not just thrown it out as an automatic response. Thank you, I whispered back, allowing myself to press closer to him. This was just dancing, just harmless fun, just proving to myself that I was still desirable. But as the song continued, and Evan's hands roamed lower on my back, as I felt the solid warmth of his chest against mine and breathed in his intoxicating scent, I realized this felt like anything but harmless. The song ended, but neither of us moved apart immediately. We stood there, breathing hard, staring into each other's eyes. The sexual tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Another dance? Evan asked, his voice rough. I should have said no. Should have thanked him for the dance and walked away. Should have gone back to Jenna, collected my victory, and gone home to my husband. Instead, I nodded. The next song was even more sensual, and this time, Evan pulled me flush against him. One hand splayed across my lower back, the other tangled in my hair. I could feel every inch of his body against mine, could feel his heart beating as fast as my own. We moved together, like we'd been dancing for years, like we knew each other's bodies intimately. His lips brushed against my ear as he whispered things that made my cheeks burn and my pulse race. I found myself responding, my own mouth finding the sensitive spot just below his ear, tasting the salt of his skin. This wasn't dancing anymore. This was foreplay on a crowded dance floor. My phone buzzed again in my purse, but I ignored it. Nothing existed except this moment, this man, this feeling of being alive and desired and reckless. When the song finally ended, we were both breathing hard. Evan's eyes were dark with want, and I knew mine probably looked the same. Come home with me, he said simply. The words hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and danger. I thought about my empty house, about Daniel probably already asleep in our king-size bed, about the wedding ring burning on my finger. I started to say, then stopped. What was I doing? This was supposed to be a stupid bet. a harmless dance to prove a point. How had it escalated to this? Philo! Jenna's voice cut through my internal turmoil. She appeared at my elbow, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. Girl, you won that bet 10 times over. That was the hottest thing I've ever seen. Reality came crashing back. The bet, the bar, my marriage. What the hell was I thinking? I have to go, I said to Evan, stepping back from him abruptly. I'm sorry, I can't. Hey, it's okay, he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his phone. At least give me your number. I'd love to see you again. I stared at his phone, my mind racing. This was where I should walk away. This was where I should thank him for the dances and go home to my husband and pretend this never happened. Instead, I found myself rattling off my cell number. I'll call you, Evan said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His lips lingered a moment longer than necessary. Soon, I nodded, not trusting my voice, and let Jenna drag me away toward the exit. Oh my God, Philo, that was incredible, Jenna gushed as we made our way through the crowd. Did you see the way he was looking at you? Like he wanted to strip you naked right there on the dance floor. And the way you were moving. Jesus, I was getting turned on just watching. I barely heard her chatter. My mind was reeling from what had just happened. The way Evan had made me feel. The electricity between us. The way my body had responded to his touch. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. But I also felt guilty as hell. As we reached the exit, I glanced back one more time. Evan was still at the bar, watching me leave with an expression I couldn't quite read. He raised his glass in a small salute, and I felt my cheeks flush. Earth to Philo, Jenna said, snapping her fingers in front of my face. You look like you've seen a ghost, or had the best almost sex of your life. Which is it? Both, I muttered, pushing through the door into the cool night air. Outside, I fumbled for my phone to call an Uber. 3 missed texts from Daniel, each one more concerned than the last. Everything okay? You're not answering. Getting worried. Please text me back. Philo, it's almost midnight. Call me. Guilt twisted in my stomach. I quickly typed back. Sorry, music was too loud. On my way home now. Love you too. It felt like a lie, even though technically it wasn't. But as I waited for my ride, I couldn't stop thinking about Evan's hands on my body, his lips against my ear, the way he'd made me feel like a desirable woman instead of just someone's wife. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for the most amazing dances of my life. Can't wait to see you again. Evan. I stared at the message, my heart racing all over again. I should delete it, should block the number, should pretend this whole night never happened. Instead, I saved his contact information. The Uber pulled up, and as I slid into the back seat, I caught sight of a familiar car parked across the street. A silver Honda Accord that looked exactly like Daniel's. But that was impossible. Daniel was home, probably asleep by now. I shook my head, telling myself I was being paranoid. Lots of people drove silver Hondas. It was probably just a coincidence. But as the Uber pulled away, I could have sworn I saw a figure in the driver's seat of that Honda, watching me leave. I crept into the house as quietly as possible, my heels dangling from my fingers. The living room was dark, except for the blue glow of the television, some late-night talk show playing to an empty couch. Daniel must have fallen asleep waiting for me. A pang of guilt hit me as I tiptoed toward the stairs. He'd probably been worried, sitting up waiting for me to come home while I was, what? Dancing with another man? Nearly cheating on him? Actually cheating on him, depending on how you defined it. I pushed the thoughts away. It was just dancing, harmless fun. People danced with other people all the time without it meaning anything. But even as I tried to convince myself, I could still feel Evan's hands on my waist, still smell his cologne on my dress, still feel the way my body had responded to his touch like it was starving for attention. The stairs creaked under my feet and I froze, listening for any sign that I'd woken Daniel. Nothing. I continued up to our bedroom, where I found him sprawled across our king-sized bed, still wearing his clothes from work. His laptop was open beside him, some spreadsheets still glowing on the screen. This was my husband, the man I'd promised to love, honor, and cherish until death do us part. The father of my 7-year-old daughter, the man who worked 60-hour weeks to provide for our family, who never complained when I spent money on clothes or girls' nights out, who loved me unconditionally. So why did looking at him make me feel so empty? I changed into pajamas and slipped into bed beside him, careful not to wake him up. But as I lay there staring at the ceiling, all I could think about was Evan. The way he'd looked at me, like I was the most fascinating woman in the world. The way he'd made me feel beautiful and desirable and alive. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. Another text from Evan. Sweet dreams, beautiful. I should have deleted it. Instead, I found myself smiling as I typed back, "You too." The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Daniel was already up, probably had been for hours. He was one of those insufferably cheerful morning people who bounded out of bed at 6 a.m., ready to tackle the day. It used to be endearing. Now it just seemed exhausting. I shuffled downstairs in my robe to find him at the stove, flipping pancakes, while our daughter Tessa sat at the kitchen table, working on some art project. At 7 years old, she was a perfect blend of both of us, Daniel's serious brown eyes and my stubborn streak. "Morning, sleepyhead," Daniel said without turning around. "How was girls' night?" "Fine," I said, pouring myself coffee. "Just the usual. Drinks, dancing, gossip. Must have been some party. You didn't get home until almost 1. There was something in his tone that made me look at him more closely. Was he suspicious, or just making conversation? "You know how time flies when you're having fun," I said lightly. "Sorry if I worried you." "It's okay. I just like knowing you're safe." He finally turned to look at me, and I felt a flicker of the old affection. Daniel really was a good man. Boring as hell sometimes, but good. "Mummy, look what I drew." Tessa held up her artwork, a crayon drawing of our family standing in front of our house. Stick figures with big smiles, holding hands. "It's beautiful, baby," I said, kissing the top of her head. "You're such a talented artist." Daniel set a plate of pancakes in front of me, and I realized I was starving. Dancing apparently worked up an appetite. Dancing and other things. "So what's on the agenda today?" Daniel asked, settling into his chair with his own breakfast. "I was thinking maybe we could take Tessa to the park, then grab lunch somewhere nice. Make it a family day." A family day. The kind of wholesome, predictable activity that used to make me feel content and now just made me feel trapped. But I pasted on a smile and nodded. "Sounds perfect." My phone buzzed. A text from Jenna. "OMG, last night was amazing. When are you seeing him again?" I quickly turned the phone face down, but not before Daniel noticed. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just Jenna being dramatic about something," I said. "You know how she is." But Daniel's expression had shifted slightly, become more watchful. "She's certainly enthusiastic about things." There was disapproval in his voice. Daniel had never liked Jenna, thought she was a bad influence. He wasn't entirely wrong, but I resented the implication that I couldn't think for myself. "She's my friend, Daniel. My best friend. She's been there for me through everything." I know. I just think sometimes she encourages you to, I don't know, be someone you're not." The comment stung because it hit too close to home. Last night, dancing with Evan, I had felt like someone else, someone exciting and desirable and free. Was that really so wrong? "Maybe the problem isn't that she encourages me to be someone I'm not," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "Maybe the problem is that you don't like who I really am." Daniel blinked, clearly taken aback by my sudden hostility. "Philo, that's not... I love who you are. I just meant... You meant that you think I'm too immature to choose my own friends, that you know better than me what's good for me." I was picking a fight, and I knew it, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. The guilt from last night was twisting into anger, looking for a target. "That's not what I said." Daniel's voice was carefully controlled, the way it got when he was trying not to escalate an argument. "I just think Jenna sometimes pushes you to do things that make you uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable? Going out with friends makes me uncomfortable." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Maybe what makes me uncomfortable is sitting at home every weekend watching you work on your laptop. Maybe what makes me uncomfortable is feeling like I'm married to an accountant instead of a man." The words hung in the air like a slap. Daniel's face went pale, and I immediately regretted saying it. But I couldn't take it back now. "Daddy," Tessa's small voice cut through the tension. "Are you and Mummy fighting?" "No, sweetheart," Daniel said quickly, forcing a smile. "Mummy and Daddy are just having a discussion. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, but it doesn't mean we don't love each other." I looked at my daughter's worried face and felt like the worst person in the world. This was exactly what I'd sworn I'd never do. Fight with Daniel in front of Tessa, make her feel insecure and anxious. "Daddy's right, baby," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "We're not fighting. Mummy's just tired from staying up too late last night." Daniel shot me a grateful look, and for a moment we were united again in our desire to protect our daughter, but the damage was done. The rest of breakfast passed in stilted conversation and uncomfortable silences. After Tessa finished eating and ran upstairs to get dressed, Daniel and I were left alone in the kitchen. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I shouldn't have said that about you being boring. That was cruel." "Is that really how you see me?" Daniel asked. "As just an accountant? As someone who's not really a man?" I looked at my husband, really looked at him. He was still handsome at 35, though he'd put on a few pounds around the middle, and his hairline was starting to recede. He worked hard to provide for us, never complained about his job, even though I knew he found it tedious sometimes. He was a good father, a faithful husband, a decent man. So why wasn't that enough anymore? "No," I said finally. "I don't see you that way. I don't know. Feeling restless lately, I guess. Like I'm sleepwalking through my life." Daniel nodded slowly. "Maybe we should plan something. A vacation, just the two of us. Remember how we used to talk about going to Italy?" Italy. We'd talked about that trip for years, back when we were young and everything seemed possible. Now it just seemed like another item on an endless list of some days that would probably never come. "That sounds nice," I said, but we both knew it was just something to say. We didn't have the money for Italy, and even if we did, we'd probably spend the whole time talking about work and Tessa's school schedule. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Evan. "Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" This time I made sure to keep the phone tilted away from Daniel, but I felt heat rise in my cheeks as I read the message. Can't stop thinking about last night. Neither could I. "I'm going to jump in the shower," I announced, standing up quickly. "Then we can head to the park." Upstairs, I locked the bathroom door and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked different somehow. My eyes were brighter, my skin seemed to glow, like I was lit up from the inside. I thought about Evan's text. "When can I see you again?" The smart answer was never. The safe answer was never. The right answer was never. But as I stepped into the hot shower, letting the water wash away the lingering scent of Evan's cologne, I found myself composing a response in my head. Soon I would text back, very soon, because for the first time in years I felt alive. And I wasn't ready to give that feeling up yet, even if it meant destroying everything I'd built with Daniel, even if it meant becoming someone I'd never thought I could be. The water pounded down on my shoulders, but it couldn't wash away the guilt or the desire or the growing certainty that I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. And the worst part? I wasn't sure I cared. 2 weeks later, we were all gathered at Daniel's mother's house for Sunday dinner, a vain family tradition that I'd grown to dread over the years. Philomene had never liked me, though she was too polite to say so directly. Instead, she expressed her disapproval through 1,000 tiny cuts. Comments about my cooking, my housekeeping, my parenting, always delivered with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tonight was worse than usual because I'd been texting with Evan all week. Nothing too explicit, just flirty messages that made my heart race every time my phone buzzed. We hadn't seen each other since that night at the Velvet Loop, but the sexual tension was building through our conversations like pressure in a steam engine. Daniel had noticed my distraction, the way I guarded my phone and smiled at messages I claimed were from work colleagues. He'd grown quieter over the past few days, more watchful. Sometimes I caught him staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Philomene, could you help me in the kitchen?" Paula's voice cut through my thoughts. She was standing in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, despite having spent the afternoon cooking. I followed her into the kitchen, where she immediately handed me a stack of plates to carry to the dining room. "How are things with you and Daniel?" she asked without preamble. Paula had never been one for small talk. "Fine," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Why do you ask?" "He seems troubled lately, distracted. Marcus mentioned that Daniel called him last week, asking about private investigators." My blood ran cold. Private investigators? Why would Daniel be asking about that? "I'm sure it's just work-related," I said, though my voice sounded strained even to my own ears. You know how paranoid corporate clients can get about embezzlement and things like that. Paula studied me with those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Perhaps, though Daniel's never handled that sort of case before. Before I could respond, Marcus walked into the kitchen carrying his 2-year-old son. At 31, Daniel's younger brother had the same quiet intensity as his sibling, but where Daniel was cautious and methodical, Marcus was more impulsive, more willing to speak his mind. "What are you two gossiping about?" he asked, tickling his son until the toddler giggled. "Just catching up," I said quickly. "How's Sarah doing? I noticed she didn't come tonight." "She's got a migraine, probably for the best. She's not great company when her head's pounding." Marcus set his son down and grabbed a beer from the refrigerator. "Speaking of company, Jenna seems to be in a good mood lately. She was practically glowing at the grocery store yesterday, going on and about some girls' night you two had. Said it was the most fun she'd had in months." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Jenna had been insufferable since that night at the bar, constantly texting me about Evan and pushing me to see him again. She seemed to think she was living vicariously through my adventure, as she called it. "Jenna's always dramatic about everything," I said, carrying the plates toward the dining room. "You know how she is." But Marcus was following me and I could feel his eyes on my back. "She mentioned you met someone, some bartender who swept you off your feet." I nearly dropped the plates. "She said what?" "Relax. She didn't give any details. Just said you still had it, whatever that means." Marcus's tone was casual, but there was something underneath it that made me nervous. Though, I have to say, Daniel's been pretty quiet about that particular girls' night. Usually he finds Jenna's stories amusing. I set the plates down with shaking hands. How much did Marcus know? How much had Daniel told him? "There's nothing to tell," I said firmly. "Jenna's just trying to make our boring night sound more exciting than it was." Marcus nodded slowly, but his expression remained skeptical. "Right, of course." Dinner was a tense affair. Daniel barely spoke, just pushed food around his plate while Paula filled the silence with chatter about the neighbors and Tessa's school performance. I tried to act normal, but I felt like everyone was watching me, waiting for me to slip up and reveal something incriminating. My phone buzzed during dessert, a text from Evan. "Thinking about you. When are we going to stop playing games and see each other again?" I glanced around the table, making sure no one was watching, then quickly typed back, "Soon, I promise." But when I looked up, Daniel was staring directly at me. Our eyes met across the table, and for a moment, I saw something in his expression that made my stomach clench with fear. He knew. Somehow, he knew. "Everything all right, dear?" Paula asked, noticing the tension between us. "Fine," Daniel said quietly, never taking his eyes off me. "Just work stuff." After dinner, while Paula was putting Tessa to bed and Marcus was dealing with his cranky toddler, Daniel and I found ourselves alone in the living room. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "About what?" I tried to keep my voice light, but my heart was pounding. "About where you really were 2 weeks ago, about who you've been texting, about why you've been lying to me." The words hit me like physical blows. I opened my mouth to deny everything, to act outraged that he would accuse me of lying, but the expression on his face stopped me cold. This wasn't the gentle, trusting Daniel I'd been married to for 8 years. This was someone harder, more determined. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said finally. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed me a video. Security footage from the Velvet Loop, grainy but clear enough to show me pressed against Evan on the dance floor, his hands roaming over my body, my mouth against his ear. My legs nearly gave out. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" Daniel's voice was deadly calm. "Is this what you call just dancing with friends?" I stared at the video, watching myself betray my marriage in high definition. There was no denying what it showed, no way to explain it away as innocent fun. "Daniel, I can explain." "Can you? Because it looks pretty clear to me. You went out with Jenna, picked up some random guy, and dry-humped him on a dance floor while I was at home taking care of our daughter." The crude words stung, partly because they were accurate. That's exactly what I'd done, when you stripped away all the justifications and rationalizations. "It was just dancing," I said weakly. "It didn't mean anything." "Just dancing." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "Philo, you look like you're about to have sex with him right there in public. And don't think I don't know about the texts." My blood turned to ice. "What texts?" "The ones you've been sending to Evan from the bar." "Did you really think I wouldn't notice you guarding your phone like it contained state secrets? Did you think I wouldn't see the way you light up every time it buzzes?" I felt trapped, cornered like an animal. "You went through my phone?" "I didn't have to. You left it unlocked on the counter yesterday morning. Imagine my surprise when I saw messages from some guy telling my wife how beautiful she is, how he can't stop thinking about her." Shame and anger warred in my chest. Shame because I'd been caught, anger because Daniel had violated my privacy. "You had no right." "I had no right." Daniel's voice rose slightly, then he caught himself and glanced toward the stairs where Tessa was sleeping. When he spoke again, his voice was lower but no less intense. "I'm your husband. I have every right to know when my wife is having an emotional affair." "It's not an affair. We haven't done anything." "Yet." The single word hung between us like a blade. "But you were planning to, weren't you? All those texts about seeing each other again, about how much you miss him. You were working up to it." I wanted to deny it, but we both knew he was right. If Evan had asked me to meet him for coffee, I would have said yes. If coffee had led to something more, I wasn't sure I would have had the strength to say no. "I never meant for this to happen," I whispered. "But it did happen, and now I have to figure out what to do about it." There was something in his tone that scared me. Daniel was the most even-tempered person I knew, slow to anger and quick to forgive. But there was a coldness in his voice now that I'd never heard before. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, I need time to think, to decide whether this marriage is worth saving." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Daniel, you can't be serious. It was just dancing. I never slept with him. I never even kissed him." "But you wanted to. It wasn't a question. And if I hadn't found out, how long before you did?" I opened my mouth to protest, to swear that I would never have crossed that line, but the words died in my throat, because the honest answer was that I didn't know. The attraction to Evan was unlike anything I'd felt in years, and it was growing stronger with every text message, every flirtatious exchange. "I don't know," I admitted finally. Daniel nodded like that was the answer he'd expected. At least you're being honest now. So what happens now? I asked, afraid to hear the answer. Now I figure out whether I can ever trust you again, whether I can look at you without seeing that video, whether I can touch you without wondering if you're thinking about him. Tears started flowing down my cheeks. Daniel, please. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake. I love you. I love our family. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you love the excitement of sneaking around with another man. It looks like you love the thrill of lying to me and making me feel like an idiot for trusting you. His words cut deep because there was truth in them. I had enjoyed the excitement, the feeling of being desired, the secret thrill of having something that was just mine. I'm sorry, I sobbed. I'm so sorry. Please don't give up on us. Daniel stood up, his face a mask of controlled emotion. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. We'll figure out the rest later. He walked toward the stairs, then paused and turned back to me. And Philo, delete his number, block him on everything. If I find out you've contacted him again, we're done. No discussion, no second chances. Done. I nodded frantically. Yes, of course. I'll delete everything. But as I watched my husband walk upstairs, as I sat alone in his mother's living room crying silent tears, I realized that the damage was already done. Daniel would never look at me the same way again. Our marriage, built on 8 years of trust and shared dreams, had been shattered by one night of selfish stupidity. And the worst part? A tiny, shameful part of me was already wondering when Evan would text me next. The next few weeks passed in a haze of tension and forced normalcy. Daniel and I went through the motions of our daily routine: breakfast, work, dinner, bedtime. But we were like actors playing roles we'd forgotten how to inhabit. He slept in the guest room, claiming he had insomnia and didn't want to keep me awake with his tossing and turning. We both knew it was a lie. I'd deleted Evan's number like I promised, but not before memorizing it. I told myself I'd never use it, that it was just a safety net, a reminder that someone out there still found me desirable. But late at night, when Daniel was downstairs watching TV and avoiding our bedroom, I found myself typing out messages I'd never send. I miss you. I can't stop thinking about that night. I wish things were different. Delete, delete, delete. At work, I threw myself into my HR duties with unusual intensity, hoping that staying busy would keep my mind off the disaster my marriage had become. But my colleagues noticed the change in my demeanor, the way I snapped at people over minor issues and seemed distracted during meetings. You okay, Philo? Asked Janet, one of the other HR coordinators, as we grabbed coffee in the break room. You seem stressed lately. Just the usual home stuff, I said, stirring sugar into my coffee with more force than necessary. You know how it is. But Janet was persistent. Is everything all right with Daniel? You haven't mentioned him in weeks, and usually you're always talking about some project he's working on, or something funny, Tessa said. The observation stung because it was accurate. I used to talk about my family constantly, sharing little anecdotes about our weekend adventures, or Daniel's latest attempts at home improvement. Now, the thought of discussing my marriage made my stomach clench with anxiety. We're fine, I lied. Just busy with work and school stuff. Janet didn't look convinced, but she dropped the subject. That afternoon, however, I overheard her talking to another colleague in hushed tones about how I seemed different lately, and wondering if Daniel and I were having problems. Great. Now my personal life was becoming office gossip. That evening, I came home to find Daniel in the kitchen making dinner while Tessa did homework at the table. It was such a normal domestic scene that for a moment I could almost pretend everything was okay. How was your day? I asked, hanging my purse on the hook by the door. Fine, Daniel replied without looking up from the stove. Tessa has a science project due next week, something about the solar system. I can help with that, I offered, Remember when we made that volcano in 3rd grade? We were so proud of how realistic the eruption looked. For a brief moment, Daniel's expression softened with the memory. We'd spent hours working on that volcano, getting covered in papier-mâché and food coloring, laughing as we tried to get the baking soda mixture just right. It had been one of those perfect family moments that you treasure forever. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I remember." But then his walls went back up, and he turned his attention back to stirring the sauce. The moment of connection was gone, leaving behind the familiar ache of loss. After dinner, while Daniel helped Tessa with her math homework, I found myself staring at my phone. I'd been good for 3 weeks, hadn't contacted Evan despite the constant temptation. But tonight the loneliness felt overwhelming, the distance between Daniel and me like a chasm I couldn't cross. Before I could stop myself, I was typing Evan's number from memory. "Hi, it's Philo from the bar. I know it's been a while." I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the send button. This was it, the moment of no return. If I sent this text, I'd be crossing a line that Daniel had explicitly drawn. I'd be choosing the excitement of the unknown over the security of my marriage. I hit send. The response came back within minutes. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten about me. I've missed you." My heart raced as I typed back. I could never forget. Things have been complicated. "Want to talk about it? I'm working at the bar tonight, but I get off at midnight. We could meet for coffee, or something stronger." I glanced toward the living room where Daniel was patiently explaining long division to our daughter. He was such a good father, so patient and kind. The guilt hit me like a physical blow, but it wasn't enough to stop me. "Where?" I typed. We arranged to meet at an all-night diner across town, somewhere I was unlikely to run into anyone I knew. I told Daniel I was going to bed early with a headache, kissed Tessa goodnight, and waited until I heard the guest room door close before sneaking out to my car. The diner was nearly empty at 12:30 a.m., just a few truck drivers and insomniacs nursing coffee and pie. Evan was waiting in a corner booth, still wearing his black work shirt, his hair slightly mussed from the humid bar atmosphere. He stood when he saw me, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. The attraction was still there, crackling between us like electricity. "You came," he said simply. "I shouldn't have," I replied, but I slid into the booth across from him anyway. "But you did." His smile was warm, understanding. "I'm glad." We talked for 2 hours, about everything and nothing. Evan told me about his dreams of opening his own restaurant someday, about traveling through Europe after college, about the book he was writing in his spare time. I found myself sharing things I hadn't talked about in years. My abandoned plans to get a master's degree, my secret poetry that I'd never shown anyone, my fear that I was wasting my life in suburban mediocrity. "You're not mediocre," Evan said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "You're extraordinary. Your husband's an idiot if he doesn't see that." The touch sent fire through my veins. "It's not his fault. We just grew apart, I guess. Became different people than we were when we got married. That doesn't mean you have to settle for being unhappy." The words hung between us, loaded with implication. We both knew what he was really saying, that I could choose differently, choose him, choose excitement over security. "I should go," I said, but I made no move to leave. "Should and want are 2 different things," Evan said softly. "What do you want, Philomene?" The way he said my full name sent shivers down my spine. When was the last time Daniel had called me Philomene? When was the last time anyone had made my name sound like poetry? "I want—" I started, then stopped. What did I want? To feel alive again, to be desired, to throw away 8 years of marriage for a few moments of passion. "I want to feel like myself again," I said finally. "I want to remember who I used to be before I became just someone's wife and mother." Evan nodded like he understood completely. "You don't have to be just one thing. You can be a wife and mother and still be Philomene, the woman who writes poetry and dreams of adventure. By the time we left the diner, it was almost 3 a.m. Evan walked me to my car, and we stood there in the empty parking lot, the space between us charged with possibility. "When can I see you again?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "This is so complicated." "It doesn't have to be." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Life's too short to spend it being unhappy. He leaned down and kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like everything I'd been missing, everything I'd been craving without even knowing it. When we broke apart, I was breathing hard, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Think about what you want," Evan said softly. "Not what you should want, what you actually want." I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling from his kiss. The house was dark and quiet when I crept inside, Daniel presumably asleep in the guest room, Tessa safe in her bed upstairs. This was my life, my real life, the one I'd built with love and intention and years of shared dreams. So why did it feel like a prison? I lay in our empty king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of the evening. Evan's laugh, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his dreams, the gentle pressure of his lips against mine. My phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for tonight. You're amazing. Sweet dreams. Beautiful." I should have deleted it, should have blocked his number like I'd promised Daniel. Should have chosen my marriage over this dangerous attraction. Instead, I typed back, "Thank you for reminding me who I am." And as I finally drifted off to sleep, I was already planning when I could see him again. The courier arrived mid-afternoon with a thick manila envelope from Morrison Phillips and Associates. My hands shook as I signed for it in my HR office. Inside, petition for legal separation and custody modification. Daniel sought primary custody of Tessa, citing my infidelity and breakdown of the marriage. Exhibits followed. Text with Evan, "Can't stop thinking about you." Photos of us at the diner. Bank statements for secret Ubers. Witness statements from Jenna bragging about my wild side. I confronted Daniel at home. "We can fix this," I begged. He showed more evidence. Our planned alone time, the kiss captured on video. "You chose him over us." Tears fell. "I never slept with him. Yet, but you betrayed our trust anyway." He'd filed primary custody for stability, joint legal, but Tessa with him. Jenna's gossip had spread. Our circle knew. Humiliation burned. Daniel's voice was calm, final. "Sign the papers. Get a lawyer. We're done." I sat alone with the wreckage, marriage shattered, daughter at risk, reputation ruined, realizing my harmless flirtation had cost everything. I'd chosen excitement over family and lost it all.